exactly 4 lines on the top. First 4 lines is kavase. Oh, sorry, I'm Rabbi. So we were discussing machaikis between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. If you have Shabbos to Yom Tov to Shabbos, an egg is laid on one, and there's immediately preceding Shabbos or following Shabbos is a Yom Tov. Could one go ahead and eat the egg on the next day? And the answer was no. So Yom Tov to Shabbos to Yom Tov or Yom Tov to Shabbos, an egg is laid on the first day, you can't eat it on the next day. And we said Allah is like, even though usually Allah is like Rabbi Yochanan, in this case Allah is the Rav, and Allah is like Rav in 3 specific cases. And the cases are the case we just mentioned, Shabbos to Yom Tov and Yom Tov to Shabbos. And the next 2 cases which are coming up, one is going to be 2 days Rosh Hashanah. If an egg is laid on one day of Rosh Hashanah, you can't have it, you can't eat it on the next day of Rosh Hashanah. That's because Allah is going to be like Rav as well. And also a case of the last case was also 2 days of Yom Tov outside Eretz Yisrael. The regular to the Yom Tov we have, Yom Tov Shel Galius, that also one day to the other will be forbidden. But let's continue. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. So on this topic of Rabbi Yochanan that we just mentioned, that we just mentioned that the according to Rabbi Yochanan, he wanted to say that's permitted from one day to the other. So Rabbi Yochanan, if you have wood that fell from a tree on Shabbos, you cannot take it the next day and burn it in an oven on Yom Tov. So if I have Shabbos and Yom Tov is the Sunday, trees fell off the tree, limbs of a tree fell off a tree on Shabbos, the next day I can't use it for my fireplace on Yom Tov. Bitzah. And on that, Rabbi Yochanan says, don't ask me from Beitza, because according to Rabbi Yochanan, if the egg is laid on Shabbos, you could use it the next day. We hold we can't, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, you can. So what's the difference between an egg that's laid on Shabbos that you could use on Sunday of Yom Tov, than a case that a limb or a branch fell from a tree on Shabbos? You are allowed to utilize. You're not allowed to utilize it on Yom Tov. My time, that now the reason is that an egg that technically an egg could be used on Shabbos without doing any malacha. You could break it open and drink the yolk. Now, the only reason we're pushing it off to the next day, according to Rabbi Yochanan, everyone's going to know midiyada the b'aftiyam asura. Everyone's going to know the reason why I didn't eat the egg the day before on Shabbos because of Noilin, because it's created on Shabbos and therefore it's forbidden. Rabbi Yochanan says, if I allow it the next day, everyone's going to know the reason is because yesterday was muksa and today is permitted. But the wood which is not permitted on Shabbos at all, and the reason is because you're not allowed to burn anything on Shabbos. If I permit it the next day, which is Yom Tov, so the main people are going to think that really even on Shabbos it's permitted. That and the reason why it was usher is because Shabbos is not permitted. You're not allowed permitted to burn, but there's nothing wrong with the actual wood. But so people are going to get mixed up between the two, and therefore he's differentiating between the wood and the egg. Now, Amar Rav Masna, once we're on this topic, we're going to have a second scenario. Amar Masna, what happens if I have a open pit for my fireplace and I have trees, branches, limbs of the tree just fell straight into the fire pit? Now I'm not moving it. I utilize that wood to burn. So the answer is, what do? I take wood which is prepared before Yom Tov, and therefore it's permitted, because usually eitzim vavanim, random wooden stones are muksa, because no one utilizes them for anything specific, unless of course you set them aside. So I take wood which I set aside for the fire, and they're not muksa, I'm allowed to use it, and I place them, I heap them on top of the limb that fell from the tree, and I sort of mavatal it, I override it, I'm sort of I nullify it due to the vast amount of the wood which is permitted. And on that we say the isura. Okay, but when you stoke it, you're going to end up mixing the. And when you stoke it, you're going to end up mixing the muksa, the ones that fell today you are going to end up touching them. You end up moving them. That's forbidden, even though it's batul, but you still can't move them. We say no. Since the majority of the wood is permitted, when I'm stoking it, we'll just say I'm stoking the wood which is permitted, and the wood which is not permitted is not being touched. On that, we have another question. How is it now? The question on this case: how could you go ahead and add wood to mux on top of muksa wood to nullify it? There is an idea in overall that although we say nullification works, we're not supposed to do nullification as I shouldn't go ahead and say, oh, this is muk. I shouldn't, whatever the case is, this piece of meat is treif. Let me chuck it into kosher meat, mix it up, and now I could go eat it. If it happens to fall in, then it's permitted. One's not allowed to do that lechatchila. So over here, that's what you're doing. You had a mux, a piece of wood in your fire pit, and now you're adding wood, which is not muksa, which is permitted, in order to override the muksa wood. So that's mabatal is lechatchila. You're nullifying something which is forbidden lechatchila, and that's forbidden. You're not allowed to do that. So the answer is keep it. So now we answer hanimili bidaraisa. That is by a biblical prohibition. However, if it's going to be a elva midrabanan mevatilan, but midrabanan a rabbinic decree, which in this case is muksa, which it is, it's muksa, it's going to be permitted. Therefore, you are allowed to add this on. Therefore, you're allowed to be mevatel, you're allowed to nullify the piece of wood, which is muksa, lichatchila. Okay. We're on Dalit Amud Beis on 4b, we're about 5 lines up from the wide line. Now, and that we say, Rav Ashi da Amar kol davar sheish le matirin afilu midrabanan le batel ma ikol minar. Now we have another rule when it comes to nullification, which we already met yesterday. The idea is that something which is, if you wait it out, it will be permitted, then there's no nullification. So in this case of the wood, wait till Mitzvah Yom Tiv. Mitzvah Yom Tiv is no longer muksa because it's weekday, and therefore then you could utilize it. So you, by adding the non-muksa and permitted wood, no nullification should take place, because according to Rav Ashi, that if you can wait it out, there's no nullification, even derabbanan. Now we say this halacha that you have to wait it out is only, and there's no nullification if you could just wait to the end of Shabbos. That's only if you have the isser, which whatever piece of wood is forbidden, in front of you. But now that once it's covered up and you can no longer see it, then the isser does not take place. Okay, so we learned this halacha that if wood falls into a fire pit, you could cover up with permitted wood, and you could nullify it. And the problem of you're not supposed to nullify something initially is not applicable, because this is the Rabbanan, not the Raisa. And also the issue of nullification doesn't take place when I can wait something out till Mitzvah Yom Tiv. That also is not applicable, because the reason why it's not applicable is because you don't see it. That's only something which is in front of your eyes. If it's not in front of your eyes, then it's no longer there, because it actually really got destroyed. Because when I lit the fire, it's no longer, it had a chemical change. The piece of wood is no longer in front of us. So if I wait till the end of Yom Tiv, meaning that the reason why I can't wait to the end of Yom Tiv is only because since it's going to get destroyed, there's nothing to wait for. That's not if I need it now. And by you, the idea of waiting to the end of Yom Tiv is only if there's not, you don't lose anything, if it's still going to be here at that point. Now, at this point where it's going to get destroyed, then it's not going to be. Then we say that it's no longer applicable. Okay, Itmar. So now we mentioned in the beginning of the class that we said that halacha is usually like Rabbi Yochanan, but however, over here the halacha is like Rav in 3 different cases. One case where we already met, an egg is laid on Shabbos, is it permitted on the Yom Tiv, which is the next day. And now we're on our next case as follows. Itmar. Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Golius. The 2 days of Yom Tiv of Golius. What we practice now. We are outside Eretz Yisrael. We have 2 days of Yom Tiv. Rav Amar, Nolda Bezeh, Umataris Bezeh. Rav says that if it's laid on the first day, it's permitted the next day. Rav Ashi Omer, nolda bezeh, asur bezeh. Rashi says that no, if it's laid on day one, then day two, the second day of Yom Tov, it's forbidden. Now that we say, Lema kasava Rashi kedushas achasi. Now why would Rav Asi go ahead? Why is Rav Asi going ahead and making it forbidden? If it's laid on day one and now it's going to be forbidden on day two. The Gemara proposes the reason is because according to Rav Asi, he holds that when we have 2 days of Yom Tov, we view the 2 days as one. Since we're not sure which day it is, we're going to go ahead and say that's one long day. And we're going to get a little deeper in a minute. But therefore, it's one long day. So day one and day two they morph into one long day. Therefore, if you lay it on day one, which is muksa, it'll be muksa as well on day two. Now we have a question. How could you come and tell me that Rav Asi holds that Yom Tov that the 2 days of Yom Tov is considered one long day? Rav Asi himself used to make Havdalah between day one and day two. So if it's one long day, what are you making Havdalah for? So he must hold that's 2 separate days. So if he holds 2 separate days, by the egg, why does he say that if it's laid on one day, the next day is forbidden? If it's 2 separate days, it should be just laid on day one. It should be permitted on day two. On that, we say Rav Asi Suki Mesafile. He wasn't sure what the halacha is. But Avid Hachil L'Chomra. He was stringent on both sides. So it came to the egg being laid on day one. He viewed it as one long day. Therefore, he was stringent, and both days were forbidden. If when it came to Havdalah, he made Havdalah between day one and day two because he was in case that the 2-day Yom Tov is really 2 separate days. Yeah.
Rabbi, first word of the line we're on?
Rav Asi. We are 2 lines down in the wide lines. Okay. Now, Amar Rav Zera, Kavasi Rav Asi mistabra de idna yadina. Now, so Amar Rav Zera, Kavasi Rav Asi mistabra. It makes sense that this idea of one day is how we hold halachically, or the idea behind the concept behind one day. The idna yadinan b'kviyadiarcha. Now we know the cycle of the months, and there's really no need for 2 days. The kavdinan treyami, but we still go ahead and we act as if it's 2 days. So the idea, the approach would be is that the reason why it's once the rabbis, we'll see in a few minutes, the reason why we were masaking 2 days is because they were far away from Yerushalayim. And usually, besides Rosh Hashanah, we'll get to Rosh Hashanah in a minute, but usually Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuos sort of are in the middle of the month. So the new moon, it would take them about 4. So it would Rosh Chodesh. The only new Rosh Chodesh was whenever in Bezdin in Yerushalayim had the 2 Eidim come and say we saw the new moon, and therefore we would at that point Bezdin would make Rosh Chodesh. So no one really knew when Rosh Chodesh should take place until Rosh Chodesh. So that's Rosh Chodesh. Now it might take up to 14. And remember, Pesach and Sukkot, so these are on day 14 of the month. So it might take in Eretz Yisrael they're able to spread the news within the 14 days. So everyone knew which day was the first of the month. So then everyone knew which day was Sukkot, which is 14 days later. However, if you lived outside the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, where it took a lot longer for others to travel, they didn't know, and so it was either 1 of 2 days. So they kept both days out of caution. Now, so the rabbis are masakin, they should keep 2 days out of being as a cautionary measure. Now, that according to this idea that it's one long day, that never changed. The rabbis made a decree that we should go ahead and keep 2 days. Now that why keep 2 days? We know the calendar right now. The reason is because they made the takana. There was a decree we should keep 2 days. So if we should keep a decree that it was enacted way back when that the 2 days are 1 day, and no one took that away. That decree was never nullified. Therefore, it's viewed as that's the idea behind the fact that it should be 1 day. We treat it as 1 day. And the proof is nowadays that we know the calendar, we still keep 2 days. If the whole problem was because we don't know what day it was, and really we viewed it as 2 days, 1 day of a suffix. Once you knew the correct calendar, we should have gone back to 1 day. The fact we go back to 1 day must be because of the decree of the rabbis, and they made it into one long day. Now, Amar Abaya, Kavase de Rav Mistabra. However, Abaya says different. Rav says maybe it makes sense that we go like the idea behind Rav that it's a 2 day Yom Tov. Now, Rab holds that we view it as 2 different days, because according to Rab, an egg which is laid on day 1 is permitted on day 2. He must hold it's not one long day, rather it's 2 separate days. The Tanakh was learned for now in the beginning, what they used to do is that they used to send up the way they would signal from one city to the other. That today's Rosh Chodesh is with they would on top of mountains. They would have fire. They would have big fire pits, and they would light mountain. Each one who saw the mountain, they would light it, and that's how the signal traveled. Now, Mishakolu Hakutim. Now, at one point, the Kusim messed things up, and they started lighting it early, lighting it late, and messing everything over. They changed that they had to send out messengers. Now it take a lot longer. Now, therefore, the messengers took sometimes up to 15 days. And even in Eretz Yisrael, it would take time, and they would not know at the edge of the borders, even though they're in Eretz Yisrael. So the rabbis are misakein that you should hold 2 days because we don't know if the messengers will reach the cities on time. Now, once this danger of the kusim messing things over disappeared, we treat it. Now we go back to 1 day. Now and therefore he's saying is that we're still, whatever the reason is. Now wherever we still have to rely on messengers, we use 2 days. So let's say outside Eretz Yisrael, where this whole signal system isn't going to work anyway. Anyway, we're going to end up using 2 days. So the idea is that the original decree of 2 days was just a temporary measure, unless we have no choice but to wait 2 days because we live outside of Israel, you're not going to know. So according to him, at least back in the days of Rav, it makes sense the idea of 2 days, because the idea of 2 days was they were still waiting for the messages from Eretz Yisrael. And in fact was wherever the messengers reached on time, then they reached on time, and it was only 1 day. They didn't reach on time, then they held 2 days. So it was changing. It was fluid from year to year. So it wasn't that the rabbis decreed for now and on is always going to be 2 days. It would depend if they get there or not. Therefore, it makes sense that they hold 2 days. And usually in Bavel, it always took 2 days because it took a lot longer for the messengers to come. Now we ask the obvious question. Now we ask, but nowadays that we know the calendar, why are we still doing this 2 day business? Because we're not waiting for messengers, we're not waiting for signs. So according to Rav, that said that they never enacted it 1 day. The rabbis never said, okay, from now on, from this point on, it's 2 days into 1 day in order not to cause in order to solve all problems. They kept it at 2 days, and they said at a suffix you have to have 2 days. So now why do we keep 1 day? Now we say, Misham the Shalchu Misham Mitam. He sent from Eretz Yisrael out to all to Bavel and all outside communities. His hiru b'minag aviseichem beidei. You should be careful to keep this custom of 2 days. Zimnam the gazru hamalchas v'zeira losi lalkuli. In case things go back to where it was and the messengers couldn't travel correctly, and let's say we end up losing the calendar. In case things go haywire, we're going to keep the 2 days outside Eretz Yisrael. So again, so according to this idea, the original decree was never 1 long day. The original decree was just a stop measure to fix the current issue. The current issue was that the Kusim messed things over, and therefore they sent out messengers. They're sending out messengers that took more time. Therefore, you have to wait usually 2 days anyway, because the first day of each month is going to be 1 of 2 days, because it depends if the month before was a 30-day month or 29-day month, so only could be 2 days. So they always kept 2 days out of caution anyway, as they waited for the messengers to come. And then Chazal told the outlying areas, meaning outside Eretz Yisrael, you should always keep it in case things go to the way it was. So the original decree was not 1 long day; it was always 2 days. And actually, outside Yisrael, we're told to keep the 2 days. That's the first opinion. That's the idea of 2 days. And the 1 day opinion is that no, the original decree was to make it into 1 day, and that never changed. And that's the whole idea of a 2 day. There's 2 ways to approach in halacha also how we deal with the 2 days. Is it 1 long day, or is it just as a custom? We're keeping the custom of the 2 days, but it's really 2 days. Now, okay, so that's Yom Tov itself, and we see that's as we said, and Rav is the one who holds and we see from here also that so the halacha like this. So it looks like the halacha over here is like Rav, and Rav said it's permitted. So it looks like an egg from one day to the other day will be permitted because originally, so it's like this, right? We said on the top of Dalam Beis, we said that if there's an argument in Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha goes usually like Rabbi Yochanan, unless for these three following scenarios, you go like Rav, whether it's for the stringent, or whether Rav is being stringent, or whether Rav is being lenient. Now, the first case we had, which was on the previous Talmud, which is yesterday, was a case of Shabbos to Yom Tov, Yom Tov to Shabbos. There, Rav was stringent and was forbidden. In this case, it looks like Rav is lenient. And if you have a 2-day Yom Tov and an egg is laid on one day, not Shabbos to Yom Tov, but Shabbos is not involved, just 2 random weekdays. In this case, Rav permits it, as we saw that Rav says, no da bizeh mutter bizeh. It's born on one day. If it's late on one day, it will be permitted on the next day. Now on to the next case of Rosh Hashanah.
If it was Shabbos Yantiv, we prohibited Yantiv.
Yes, so if it's
But if it's a regular day, just a normal day.
2 regular days.
Yeah.
Yes.
2 more.
So if it's 2 weekdays, which are Yom Tov, then it's late, according to at least Rav, it's late on one day, it will be permitted on the other day. But if it's Shabbos, it'll always be forbidden. If Shabbos gets involved, it'll always be forbidden. Now, Itmar. Now we're on 3 lines down, 3 lines up from the bottom line of Dalet Amud Beis. But we're going to 25 today? 25? Okay. There were 3 lines up on Dalet Amud Beis, Itmar, in the middle of the line. Itmar, so that's the following case. Shnei Yom Tovim shel Rosh Hashanah. 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Rav Shmuel, the Amar Travayu, Nerd Vizah, Asur Vizah. Now we're going to, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, Rav reverts to being stringent and he holds that if it's late on one day, it'll be forbidden on the next day. That's it, because we learned. That originally, when it came to Rosh Hashanah, they used to be willing to accept Eidim all day. Now, meaning that we're not sure if Elul was going to be a 30-day or 29-day. We're waiting for Eidim to tell us. So on day 29, so we're not sure. So the day after the 29th, which is the 30th, right? We're not sure if the 30th is going to be Rosh Chodesh or it's going to be the last month of Elul. And Rosh Chodesh, of course, in this scenario is the only time when Rosh Chodesh equals the holiday, right? All the other holidays are middle of the month, so you have some leeway to figure things out. Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah. The second the Eidim come in, all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, holidays Rosh Hashanah, and we're in the store having, working. So what they would say is, so on the start of the 30th, everyone would stop malacha. They would stop doing work because we don't know if Eidim are going to come today. And retroactively, it was Rosh Hashanah. So, and then they would wait all day for Eidim to show up. If Eidim would show up to the last second of the day, then today was Rosh Hashanah. And I guess they would blow shofar very quickly and they would run through everything as quick as they can. And the next day, we're back to regular. The next day is just a regular weekday. Now, what happened was, Pamachas one time, Nishto Ha'idim Liba, and we're on to the top of Pei Amid Al. And we're going to move to the top of Pei Amid Al. That it took a long time for the Eidim to show up. They came like literally a few minutes before the end of the day. This Kalkukul Havim Bishir. Now what happened is that by the Tamid Shabein Arbaim, the evening Tamid, that's when we go ahead and we're supposed to we are supposed to sing the right song. And what happened was that since the Eidim came after the bringing of the Tamid, the afternoon or evening Tamid, the Levim who were supposed to sing the Shira is saying the Shira of a weekday. Then the Eidim come like, oh my gosh, we sing the Shira of the weekday and not the Shira of Rosh Hashanah. Now, the reason why they were, Rashi explained, now, why were they so concerned about the afternoon Tamid? Don't forget, there was the morning Tamid, and the Levim sing the Shira by the morning Tamid, and they sang the wrong Shira. So all of a sudden, we're getting worked up about the afternoon Tamid. So the answer is that usually, on a regular Rosh Chodesh, which is not Rosh Hashanah, just a regular weekday Rosh Chodesh, the same thing would happen. But since it's so frequent that the Eidim would come late, they were just the basic mix was used to the Levim singing the wrong shir in the morning. They would usually sing the weekday shira when really they're supposed to sing the Rosh Chodesh shira. But when it became so late in the afternoon and they didn't sing the Rosh Hashanah shira, it really bothered them. So Tiknu Shveihoyu Mekabum as Eidim El Alamincha. they changed it that they will only accept the witnesses until Mincha, meaning they'll only change the day and they'll only establish the day of Rosh Hashanah if the Eidim come, as long as the Eidim come before Mincha. So as long as before they bring the Tamid, we'll accept it. We'll wait till Rosh Hashanah, and therefore we can have the Revim sing the correct song. Now, what happens if the Eidim come after Mincha, before sundown? They said was, okay, we're going to treat today as Kodesh. However, we're still going to establish, but still tomorrow is also going to be Rosh Hashanah. So even the time of the Beis Hamikdash, they many times had a 2-day Rosh Hashanah. One day they kept because they weren't sure. The evening came too late, they would just keep Rosh Hashanah the next day as well. Now, so therefore, everyone was going to agree that from day one, for that point on, they always had a 2-day Rosh Hashanah, unless the Eidim came early. But since there was, unless the Eidim came before Mincha and said today Rosh Hashanah, and therefore they would just have that day Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so fine. So the Rav that's the case of Rav. Therefore, Rav said that if they always would treat it as one long day, and therefore Rav said that if it's late on one day, it will be forbidden on the next day. Now, Amar Rabba. Now, however, once Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai made his takana, we will see that we end up being that the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the egg would be permitted. Now, what's this takana? It's not because we learned. Once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, his Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai he reverted back and he made it that they were willing to accept witnesses all day. Now, since there was no shir anyway, there's no Beis Hamikdash, there's no singing, so it's accept the Eidim all day. And therefore, so therefore, they usually would have Rosh Chodesh one day, and therefore, so we undid the original decree that there should be usually a 2-day Yom Tov. We reverted back to 1-day Yom Tov, and it happens to be if the Eidim come the next day and say they didn't see end up being a 2-day Yom Tov, not because of a decree, and because they had to treat 1 day out of caution, and the next day was really Rosh Hashanah. There's only really 1 day Rosh Hashanah, not 2 days as in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So Amalei Abai. So therefore, it's only 1 day, and therefore, if the egg is late on 1 day, we're not treating Rosh Hashanah as one long day. It'll be pinned the next day. Amalei Abai. But the problem is as follows: Rav and Shmuel came well after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And now, so how could Rabba's claim that from the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai on, we treated we treated an egg on 1 day of Rosh Hashanah, forbidden on the next day of Rosh Hashanah. But Rav and Shmuel that mentioned that the egg of 1 day Rosh Hashanah is forbidden on the next day Rosh Hashanah. They were well after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So if it's true Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai on, an egg which was laid on 1 day Yom Tov is permitted on Rosh Hashanah, is permitted the next day Rosh Hashanah because we don't view it as one long day. We only view it as 2 separate days. How could Rav and Shmuel say different? I would say Amrlei Amina Lecha Anna Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at the Amrlei Rav and Shmuel. So you gotta understand. You're bringing from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. I'm bringing Rav and Shmuel. So they argued. What's the problem? Rav and Shmuel argued on Yochanan ben Zakkai. On that we ask Rav and Shmuel Kasha Masnisan. If that's so, then the question of Rav and Shmuel is coming from a Mishnah because Yochanan ben Zakkai was part of the Mishnayos. He was a Tana. Rav and Shmuel was part of the Gemara. He was a Meira. So now we're just going to change the question and say, how could Rav and Shmuel go against Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was a Tana? So like Kasha, that's not a question. Kuhalan, this was Rav and Shmuel in Chutz La'aretz in Bavel. V'haluhu, this was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai in Eretz Yisrael. So Rav and Shmuel in this. So Rav and Shmuel, who were outside Eretz Yisrael, they stayed with the idea of the original decree of Yom Tov, that Rosh Hashanah, they stayed with the original decree of Rosh Hashanah. The Rosh Hashanah was always 1 day, and that never was taken back in Chutz La'aretz. But in Eretz Yisrael, it was taken back, and therefore Rosh Hashanah we don't view Rosh Hashanah as one long day in Eretz Yisrael. So meaning it comes out a little funny. In outside Eretz Yisrael, a 2-day Yom, at least according to Rab, a 2-day Yom Tiv is viewed as 2 separate days, 2 totally separate days. An egg which is laid on one will be permitted on the other. But Rosh Hashanah, according to Rab, is 1 long day. And that pretty much the reason is because, logically, sort of makes sense that the original decree of just 2-day Yom Tiv was never really took place in Yerushalayim itself. In Yerushalayim itself, they didn't have to send up the signals. Everyone knew within a few hours that today's Rosh Chodesh. So, and then you have to wait, and then for sure, because Yom Tov usually 14 days after Rosh Chodesh. So everyone in Yerushalayim always knew the right day. So there was never an enactment by the rabbis, at least in Yerushalayim, it should be 2 days. That there never was in Yerushalayim. Therefore, Rav was saying that decree was never sent out all over, and the reason outside Eretz Yisrael they kept 2 days is just because they were told keep it just in case things go back to the way it was. But Rosh Hashanah in Yerushalayim, it was 2 days in Rosh Hashanah. The rabbis decreed in Yerushalayim you should keep 2 days in order that because of the issue as we explained. So that means there was a decree that even in Yerushalayim there should be 2 days. That means they turned it into 1 day, and that 1 day also was spread out to Bavel. So ended up being in Bavel, Rosh Hashanah was 1 long day, while a regular Yom Tov, a 2-day Yom Tov, a regular Yom Tov that we have, ended up staying 2 separate days. Now we ask the question. Rav Yosef Amar, Afmit Kanas Rabbi Yechim and Zakai Ve'elat Ve'ya Asura. Rav Yosef argues on Rabbah. Rabbah said from after Rabbi Yechim and Zakai, after the destruction of the temple, there's no need to have the decree of a 2-day Rosh Hashanah because there's no longer singing the Mikdash and nothing could go wrong at least with that. But Rav Yosef argues and says no, that even after Rabbi Yechim and Zakai, we still had a Beya would still be Asr on Rosh Hashanah. My time from 1 day to the other. My time I have a davar shebiminion, called davar shebiminion tzarach minion achal hatir. So so he's explaining like this: the decree, the original decree that we saw, because they came late and they end up saying the wrong shira, so therefore the rabbis decreed that it should be they made it into 2-day they made it into 2 days. That was enacted with a davar shebiminion. It was enacted with the great bezdin. Now, in order to remove a rabbinic decree, we need a bezdin equal or as great as the one that enacted it, and there was no such thing, right? The great bezdin in the temple enacted that, and after the destruction of the temple, we never had such a great assembly since then. So therefore, we can never detract it. That's his question, and that's why Rav Yosef argues in Rabbah, and Rav Yosef says no. It will always be a 2-day Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah, and we'll always view it as 1 long day. Now, Amar Rav Yosef, so Yosef says, how do I know if a bezdin enacts a decree? You need a bezdin of greater numbers to detract it, equal or greater.
Why do we need basically to declare Rosh Chodesh after? I would think that we know the pattern, right? Like back in the day.
Even back then they knew it.
They would have
Yeah, because I just kept it, even though apparently they did know the patterns, or some people knew the pattern and were able to predict it precisely. They kept because that's the way that was the halacha. The halacha was the only way to mimic it's not the only way, but the right way to be mekadesh the chodesh, to bring the chodesh, is with the power with Adam. People with the power of Yisrael themselves to go ahead and enact the Rosh Chodesh, which in turn enacted the Yom Tov. Just keeping the power as it was supposed to be, the power of Yisrael. It's a good question. I've heard it asked before because they definitely knew the patterns of the lunar patterns. Okay. Rabbi Yosef. So now Rabbi Yosef's proving if one bezdin enacts a bezdin enacts a decree, you need a bezdin equal or greater to detract it. The chesiv writes as follows: by Har Sinai, says Lech Emor Lehem Shuvu Lechem Lelechem. Says that by Har Sinai, after Har Sinai, Hashem said, okay, you could go back to your tent, meaning you're allowed to return to be together with your wife. V'amar the Meshach HaYovel, that's number one. V'amar also says Meshach HaYovel Hema Ya'alu Bahar. Also, it said after, and then also it says that after you hear the shofar blast, you're able to ascend the mountain. Because again, in both cases, God said they should stay away from the wives for 3 days, and then Hashem had to tell them to return. Also, Hashem said no one's allowed to go up to the mountain. Then Hashem said after the shofar blast, at that point on, you could ascend the mountain. So Rashi explains that for both of them, why does Hashem have to tell them either? To understand, after Har Sinai, everything goes back to normal. That's the idea. The idea is when there's a decree, this is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, when there's a decree, it's never detracted until it doesn't go by, it can't be annulled by itself. It only can be annulled by someone equal or greater. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to tell them, I told you you can't go up to the mountain. Now you could go up to the mountain. Without Hashem saying that, we would think it would continuously be forbidden. And the same thing with returning to the camp. Now, also we learned, Karem Revai have a oil Yushalayim mihalich yom echad uchol tzad v'tzad. Now the halacha was when it came to the 4th year. So if you have a vineyard or an orchard, the 4th year for the first 3 years the fruit's forbidden. And the 4th year you're supposed to take the fruit and go up to Yerushalayim and eat it. Now the rule was, Karem Revai, they used to take it up to Yerushalayim. That's only on condition that you were 1 day's journey. If you're more than 1 day's journey, then you could, and then they explained the journey. Then you didn't have to go up to Yerushalayim, and you could be paid it. You could put it on the coins and eventually come to Yerushalayim whenever you do. Now, on that we say, and this is what a day's. This is the area that's a day's journey to Yerushalayim. It says, Olas min Tzafon. It's a city called Olas in the north, the Ekravas min Adaraim, the Ekravas in the south, Lud min HaMa'ariv, Lud in the west, the Yarden min HaMizrach, and it's a Jordan to the east. V'amar Ula, Rabbi Boruch, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Matam. And then we asked, so what's the reason? Why did the Torah why did the Beitza tell us, or the Mishnah, the Beitza, why did the Beitza come and tell us the cities which are within a day's journey? And the answer is, why is it that, why was there, technically, there's no reason to go to Yerushalayim. You could always just put it on coins and then bring the coins to Yerushalayim in the future. Why did the rabbis decree that one should, if you're within a day's journey, you're not allowed to do that? You have to come to Yerushalayim. So the Gemara answers, in order to beautify the marketplace in Yerushalayim full of fruit. Matanya. And now we also learned, so the Tanya, and then we also learned in order to take this decree away, because remember that after the destruction of the temple, they wanted to take away the decree, and therefore you could always just put it on, place on a coin and redeem it. The Tanya, Karem Revai, one of the last line of Peyam Aleph. The Tanya, Karem Revai, Rabbi Lazar, and we said that Rabbi Lazar had a vineyard, and he had the 4th year fruit from the grapes of the vineyard, and he lived with Mizrach Lud. He lived we said that Lud was the boundary of a day's journey from Yerushalayim. And it says here that he lived east of Lud. That means he lived between Lud and Yerushalayim, because Lud is to the east, right? Think of Yerushalayim, Lud is Tel Aviv, Lud is the airport. So therefore it's to the west. So, and this city was to the east of Lud, therefore that means he was between Yerushalayim and Lud. Now, in a village called Kartei. Now, he did not want to go to Yerushalayim, and he wanted to give his fruit to the poor. So Amrullah, and they were going to take it to Yerushalayim. He just didn't want to deal with it. Amrullah, Talmida, Rabbi Kfar Nimnu Alecha Chavercha V'Hetiroi. He wanted to find out, is that allowed? And because he thought that he wasn't allowed to be paid it, but he didn't want to go to Yerushalayim either. Therefore, he gave it to the poor, and they would take it up. So I'm like, Rabbi, is it not true that your friends got together and they already said that now with the destruction of the temple is permitted to be paid at all times? Now, man chavercha, who is this chaver? Who's this friend of Rabbi Lazar that decreed that now one is permitted to redeem their 4th year fruit? So Rabbi Zakai, Taima dimno. So the main point of this entire story is that the student told Rabbi Lazar, your friend Rabbi Yochanan Zakai was nimnu. He already was counted, and he detracted the original decree. So we see from here that even though the original reason of the whole idea of the decree that one has to bring up his fruit within a day's journey of Yerushalayim, and you cannot redeem it and bring it up at a later point, was to beautify the marketplace in Yerushalayim. And after the destruction of the temple, we'll see in a minute, Rabbi Boruch decided there's no need for that anymore. With the destruction, we don't want to beautify Yerushalayim. We want a reminding of the morning. So why was he at Rabbi Chazaki did not have to go ahead and appoint a whole bezdin and retract. He could have said, just use your logic, and it could have retracted automatically. So there's no reason for it. Because here we see that no, once a bezdin enacted a decree, even if the reason left, you still need another bezdin equal or greater to detract it. Now, my va'omer, what's the omer? What is if you look before, we said we're going back to the original proof. The original proof brought two proofs from Har Sinai. One was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said you could return to your wives, because if originally said you can't, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to tell you to go back, otherwise it would never be retracted. The other one was that the animals. The other one was that you could extend the mountain. Hashem said you can. But without HaKadosh Baruch Hu retracting it, it would never be retracted. So we see from there the idea that you need equal or greater to detract it. Now, the original decree was that you have to separate 3 days from your wife. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to go return. Now, so the first thing we learn is you need something equal greater to take it back. Maybe I might think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't telling him to go back to detract his original decree. He's just telling him now that you stayed away from marriage for 3 days, you have a commandment to be together with it. Tashma. So therefore, we have the next verse. It said with the extra long blow, you could climb the mountain. I might think, and then but elsewhere we said that that no one was allowed to approach the mountain. But why is it that we need this extra? Why do we need a verse to tell us that you're allowed to extend the mountain? To teach you that once HaKadosh Baruch Hu enacted a decree, in this case, you need something equal and greater to detract it. Same halacha when it comes to a decree, you need a bezdin equal or greater to detract it, and that's why when it came to the fruits of the 4th year, you needed a bezdin or to detract it, and that's why Rabbi Yosef says that when it came to Rosh Hashanah, there never was a bezdin greater or bigger enough to detract it. Therefore, Rosh Hashanah remains one long day.